Hi everyone! Today a video in a rather special forest because it's not a forest, it's a garden. A garden that grows on its own, without watering, without chemical fertilizers, without maintenance, without much human work. This is what we call a forest garden or an edible forest. It can feed dozens and dozens of people for years without needing, unlike a traditional vegetable garden, a lot of maintenance or replanting. Every year it's there and it produces food in abundance. We owe this forest garden to Fabrice Desjours, who transformed a 25,000 square meter field 15 years ago. 2.5 hectares into an edible forest that doesn't need to be replanted every year and therefore provides food perpetually. He is going to show us how he built this oasis step by step. And how can we reproduce this at home? To finally give up our traditional vegetable gardens and switch to agroforestry? Can you explain to us again what is the principle of a forest garden?
The principle, as we can see, is an agriculture that is disguised as a forest. And unlike conventional agriculture, which is mostly based on the use of annual plants, so instead of having to replant every year, here we really build the spaces with perennial plants, woody plants that will live for a very long time. And we'll have ingredients coming from all the layers of this forest, meaning from the tree layer, shrubs, vines, and all the small plants. These are plants that need sunlight, partial shade, and they can be either terrestrial or aquatic as well. So actually, we're going to have lots of spaces that will be connected to each other. And then actually everything, or almost everything, will provide us with food from within.
We're moving from a traditional one-dimensional vegetable garden to a three-dimensional space.
We're actually working, as you said, with volumes, with verticality, with density. We call it density diversity. So indeed, there's this structural aspect of the edible forest, of the forest garden, which is really layered like that. And then we'll look at the composition, which is unique because it's still very diverse. So here, we're dealing with a little over 1,000 food species that are going to be tested. So you see, just to get a sense of it, in our average plate in France, we eat between 40 and 60 food species at most, some of which are imported. So there you have it. We're working on a little over 1,000 species. It's huge, and so most of them are really plants that will live for a long time and have a certain richness in their composition. And we have gardens, forests, generally that will contain, let's say, between 40 and 80 species, which is already remarkable for an agricultural model.
And what's the difference, let's say, compared to permaculture or organic farming?
So it's still going to be classified in the same category. Let's say it's a bit like permaculture, because permaculture is about establishing societies that are sustainable, that are built, that are well thought out. And here, that's really the case because, anyway, we're going to imitate the most efficient model in our climate, which is the forest model. That's what inspires us. So we're going to mimic what the forest creates, The forest, without watering or fertilizing, is one of the planet's biggest producers of biomass. And as soon as we're in parts of the world with more than 500 millimeters of annual rainfall, you'll naturally see forest landscapes start to form. Earth has 4 main forest types: boreal, temperate, tropical, and Mediterranean, depending on the location. And so imitating these things will give you a system that, in the long run, will be extremely sustainable. This forest garden requires no tilling, fertilization, or watering compared to the goals that are his. So that's also something to weigh depending on the objectives. If you have an agricultural forest garden, it can be a bit different. But there you go. We have these things that are lush and productive. In the long run, you just need to walk around and harvest.
But compared to a regular forest, you still have a bit of human work to plant the species that will be useful to you. You don't just leave things up to chance either.
There's really a lot of work at the beginning, selecting the species, also the varieties, putting them together, assembling them in the most efficient way. And it's really a garden, actually. It's not a forest, so that's where things start to blur. Actually, it's not arboriculture, it's not market gardening, it's not wild foraging, it's not forestry, it's not arboriculture. It's all of that at once. It's a kind of mix. And that creates a very unique forest, which is something relatively new in the West, at least.
And it's not just a food-producing forest, it also produces a whole bunch of other things.
That's it, exactly. So we do have the food part, so we'll get fruits, seeds, oil seeds, starchy parts that are particularly high in calories, foliage, and edible flowers. It can also be small livestock. There can be chicken farming, for example, in this kind of system. We can also harvest if we want to eat meat wild animals, because they come back in very large numbers. And then we will have products from the beehive, for example. So these are what we call forest products, because they are partly things that are also, as we will see during the walk, things we gather, partly new things. We will indeed have medicinal plant resources, but they are not small plants like we are used to. Small sun-loving perennial plants like thyme, hyssop, and sage. No, we can actually have medicinal trees, medicinal vines, shade plants, aquatic plants. So it's a really big addition. We'll also have fuel, so we can heat ourselves. Using these systems, using these special gardens. And the fourth major category of production is what we call biomaterials. Edible forests can provide fibers, gums, resins, latex, and roofing plants from certain specimens. And resources that are currently mostly based on petrochemistry, on the use of petroleum. Afterwards, things that cause health problems will emerge, as there will obviously be a whole chemical cocktail coming from these productions. So here, a single specimen will serve us for several uses, and here again we find this logic of permaculture to achieve this efficiency.
You're stating that we have food, biomaterials, and biodiversity returning? And on top of that, we have carbon storage, which must be significant.
The carbon storage is being studied by researchers from French National Research Institute for Agriculture, Food and Environment that we're working with. It's actually under the supervision of Électricité de France with the research objectives of the ADAPT Center. And indeed, there are some initial indications showing that we really have very significant growth. Despite the inputs in different areas of the productive forest, these are optimistic things that we observe empirically, and now we'll really need to analyze them in detail from a scientific point of view to really have data and repeatability regarding what we're trying to highlight. The principles, as we've said, are the layered structure with the combination of trees, shrubs, vines, and herbaceous plants. It's going to be the composition, which means a certain diversity that's really influenced by the world of the hortus, H-O-R-T-U-S, which is where the French word horticulteur comes from. But it really comes from those who garden the forest and who are in spaces that already have a great diversity, especially of plants. And so the third principle of these spaces generally is that they will be planted in phases of establishment. It's not all at once, actually. And also in terms of density, we'll have the target species, the ones we're interested in, which we won't necessarily prune, and then the others that are added in, which we'll prune to fertilize. Then rapidly tweak the plot parameters slightly. That is the humidity, the shading patterns, the amount of bacteria and fungi that will create the life of the soil and the forest. And so this establishment, there are some plants, in fact, that really don't like full sunlight at all. So when you start from a meadow, you'll have to wait until you actually have a sort of canopy that begins to create patterns of shade. And at that point, we'll be able to introduce some of these plants around us that need partial shade, that need soil that will be restructured, that will start to resemble forest soil. We have this phased construction. So here, not everything was planted at the same time.
Planting a forest garden means planting hundreds or even thousands of plants, so it's a big financial investment. That's why Fabrice Dejour recommends not necessarily buying new plants, but also using second-hand plants, recovered plants, or cuttings, for example. Yes, because you said it yourself. You actually started with a meadow, a field that was 2.5 hectares, 25,000 square meters of deadland, and you had to bring life back to that field, little by little. How did it go, the different steps?
Different steps. So I arrived here in 2010. I did everything by myself. I really planted densely. So there are indeed the specimens that interest me. It could be chestnut, walnut, or apple trees, or lesser known species like acabias or oleisters. And so it's the plants that will interest me, that will produce food for me. And then I'll add plenty of things like ash trees, alders, willows that are planted around the edges and that I'll eventually prune to really feed the forest. The forest feeds me, and in this way, I feed it in return. And then if you want all of this, it's going to allow my target plants to grow much faster. They'll have significantly reduced sunlight exposure throughout the day. Starting from 2010, 2011, we started having climatic years, some of which were really problematic, with periods when it was very hot and very dry. I remember hazards like storms that sometimes come in September or October when not all the leaves have fallen yet, sometimes hailstorms, so things that were really problematic. In 2012, we got hit by hail. There was no more roof on the house, and there were impacts from the hailstones. It had killed animals. There was foliage all over the roads. Things had been so shattered. But since you have this density, it eventually grows back. And they also protect each other, at least partly.
So you always say, with some structuring plants, trees, and then you build the diversity around them.
Exactly, or it can happen at the same time. But basically, you really think about the plant arrangement. It's like a puzzle, actually. At that point, the edible forest is the puzzle itself, the whole thing. And you can have the pieces of the puzzle thought out for 1 square meter or 10 square meters. And the color will match the adjacent colors based on the incoming light and other factors. But in any case, planting densely at the beginning really helped. And then I did other things as well. Sometimes I put up shade covers on certain specimens that needed a little help when they were small. And then forest starter, adding forest starter, it's something that's free. You go to a forest near your home with the same type of soil. You take a little bit of surface soil, just a small amount. It's like sprinkling powdered sugar on a cake, and you just sprinkle a little bit on the surface, on the plants. Then you add mulch, you put some cardboard, whatever you need to protect the plant, and then mulch it well to keep the moisture in. From there, the forest starter will inoculate the plant with microbes, bringing it its fungi, bacteria, and protozoa. All the forms of life that are invisible, that are underneath, and that make the forest grow continuously, producing without adding any inputs.
So your goal with this forest garden, was it to be self-sufficient in food, for example?
So yes, I really had 2 main goals for myself, actually even 3. It was to have self-sufficiency, obviously, for the family, and to share the space with the rest of living beings. So it's not just about being a farmer. There are wild boars that can pass through certain areas. There are deer, there are badgers, there are foxes, and of course, a lot of birds. You can actually hear them now. There are reptiles that have come back, amphibians, and lots of insects. So really, can we produce food along with the rest of living beings? That was really it. That's what I'd seen in the tropics and what had inspired me so much. And then the third goal for me was really something a little bit, I didn't explain it like that. I put research development, meaning testing on as many species as possible. So that's something exploratory, experimental, and then see how we're going to work with these products. So we work on it internally within the association, and we also work with chefs and restaurateurs. Now they come to discover these products, and it's kind of a whole bunch of worlds that are interconnected. It's pretty fascinating.
So you were telling me you have everything you need to be self-sufficient, but you don't have the time to do it. But that's not the goal here. It's not just about being different or self-sufficient. You can see it here. It's an educational goal to welcome people and show them. Well, the forest garden, that's what you were telling me before. There are 1,000 plant species, whereas usually it's more like 50 to 80 species. Because you have this educational intention above all.
That's it, to really see what we could acclimatize actually in lots of places. Projects are set to take place not only in Burgundy, but also at the tip of Brittany, in high altitude areas, Maquis Garrigues, plains climates, and sometimes in flood zones. So in environments that are very, very different from each other. Indeed, what is going to be adapted in that context? So we're really dealing with something research-oriented. It's actually the experimental garden here that allows us to develop lots of projects with project leaders from all over and to follow up. So that's the heart, let's say, of it. The goal of the association is to develop nourishing reforestation. We call these edible forests, or these forest gardens, under the broad term of nourishing reforestation. It's the only model of agriculture that is able to maintain tree cover. And actually, to put it very simply, we've been practicing annual agriculture for 7,000 years. So we've been doing it without even realizing it. But it's a type of agriculture that is, by nature, deforesting when you practice annual agriculture. Here, we're practicing agriculture with perennial plants. It's an agriculture and cuisine that will reforest. So it really opens up huge possibilities to have spaces that will provide food, spaces that will cool the environment, spaces where we can also teach things, spaces that will take care and regenerate. So that's what interests us. And so to spread the message. So if you want, there really has been a movement for several years now, a grassroots movement to develop these kinds of spaces. It's really individuals who have taken hold of it from the very beginning. And now we're starting to have something a bit more territorial, with gardens and forests that are managed by communities, by institutions, and also by political authorities. There are really some things that are super optimistic that are underway.
And you were talking about forest cuisine. Is it really possible with your forest to cook our lunch? Can we do it?
That's what we're going to find out. We're going to go
See what we can find what we can find.
there. You see, for example, you have young shoots of Heracleum mantegazzianum. That's a great vegetable when lightly cooked. Actually, it tastes a bit like carrot, something a little resinous and tender. It's really, really good. These are some berries that we can harvest to put, why not, in the appetizer, you see? With the salad and then the cooked hogweed shoots, these are daylily flowers, which are also called one-day lilies. Many people have these in their gardens without realizing they are edible. We're going to eat the cooked spring shoots, the cooked roots as well. And at this time of year, it's the harvest of flowers and also flower buds. And this is going to be a vegetable. We're going to saute it, you see, not for long in the pan, a cooked vegetable. That's what we're making a lot of right now. These are Michelumi flavors from Japan. It's a small fruit and it's sweet, tangy. It was introduced about a century ago in the Baccarat region. Around a year, yes, they also make wine with it. The silver bell tree, also known as the cucumber tree, is a very beautiful tree when it blooms. The plant is young, only 3 years old. You can use these small, immature fruits that are harvested even for such a young plant. There's already quite a bit of production, but the more you already have had, the harvest was done on top. You can take the little flavors of cucumber that, in any case, yeah, it's something tender that we usually make as a marinade, as pickles in lots of ways. Here, we'll harvest what everyone has in their gardens. It's a forgotten vegetable. It's a big meal, actually. No, it's not that it's eaten that often. It's a good vegetable and it's very tender. It's very juicy. A bit like a salad. Yeah, it's exactly like a salad. So the dessert we're going to eat later will be made from the fruits of that bush over there. You can see everything it will produce this year with the harvest at the end of summer, which will have kept. It's called autumn olive with yellow fruit. Here we're looking at something more classic. Currants, yeah, these are the classic red currants, but actually the best varieties are the pink or white ones, which aren't ripe right now. So what about this? It's a plant called wild coriander or marsh or tunia. It's a plant used as a condiment. Actually, if you rub it and eat it raw like this, it's very aromatic, so we'll use it in small quantities. And it's especially good when you treat it a bit like spinach. So you blanch it for 2, 3, 4 minutes, and after that, it becomes a vegetable that's super tender and much less aromatic.
See? Yes, because right now it's really, really strong.
Ah yes, here, really. When it's raw, it's used as a condiment, and when it's cooked, it's used as a vegetable. These are begonias, known as houseplants. This hardy begonia can withstand temperatures from 15 to 18 degrees. So now we eat the leaves of begonias, which are tangy because they contain a lot of vitamin C. There you see, we'll eat some walnuts later. You can see them, these ones that are forming this year's walnuts. There you see, if we're not careful, we'll step on them. Actually, there are a lot of fruits here on the ground. So you really need to have a sharp eye. I think that here, you see, it comes from the tree that's right above us. It's from the white walls and it illustrates the point well. Actually, it's really like a jungle kind of about food. We don't have the eye for it. It's really an invisible agriculture. It's always important to really know the plants, to know what they consume and when.
We're finally at the table after cooking well. We have a lot of things that we picked together earlier. There are a lot of things you picked before and that we reused. Can you tell us a bit about everything we're going to eat?
We're going to start with a salad with a mix of wild plants. There's the salad we know which grows in clearings. There's also hydrocotyle. And then there's the sedum that we picked. The sedum, we picked it together. The hydrocotyle, I picked it at another time. You can add some walnut. The walnuts. You can continue, for instance, with a stir fry of daylily flowers that we have. Harvested. This is Chinese pepper or wild coriander. This vegetable, you know, which has come back, we blanched it a little, blackcurrant, high flower, daylilies. This is going to be the more substantial dish, since we're going to have a combination that makes a sort of puree with potato. These little beaks, which you see here, are things we harvest and dry at the end of summer, along with mountain yam. These are aronia berries, which actually help create a slightly sweet and salty balance. Here we find the silver bell tree, the one that produces those cucumber-like fruits. We put them in, sauteed them, and added some mulberries. This is Hercules hogweed, the vegetable harvested at the start. Here it's a kind of puree made from little Japanese gummies.
This is kind of the dessert corner here.
Yes, this is the dessert corner. Here we'll have ice cream, well, a frozen dessert, but it's really just the raw fruit that's been put in the freezer from the autumn chélève with yellow fruits. And then on top, we added honey and then brushed it with honey. And then you have the leaves of begonia and then more fresh fruits over there. And then that, so the coffee, well, no, it's not actually coffee, it's roasted acorns, because the acorns. So sometimes we make preparations with biscuits, cakes with acorn flour. It's a food staple. And here, after destroying the tannins through roasting, we get a kind of coffee, but there's no caffeine in it. You can stick to the traditional starter, main course, and dessert, or mix things up however you like.
Here, we only have things to eat that I have no idea what they're called. I wouldn't be able to tell you what we're eating. Is it also possible to make a forest garden with more traditional things like tomatoes, zucchinis, cucumbers, and peppers?
Yes, there are the vegetables we know in the clearings. There are also the fruit trees we know. There are apples, pears, peaches, and apricots there. But the idea was also to highlight things that are not well known. And actually, this is a European vegetable, so we have plenty of them around us. And that's a shame, because often people don't know these plants or don't know this vegetable. And Heracleum mantegasianum is something really delicious. Go ahead, taste it, and then tell me what you think.
If we get lost with all these new vegetables, plants, and flowers, we may not know how to cook them. You co-authored the book Cooking the Forest Garden with Claire Moki, which contains recipes to teach alternative cooking methods.
Yes, it's really to cook these products from food forests, what we call edible forests, so to really have a cuisine that is reforesting. And so, there you go, it's about learning with transformations, with preparations, with different ingredients. For projects spread out across France, since Claire is based in the south, we're also working with various plants that may differ from those found here.
A forest garden can be created pretty much anywhere in France, and especially on any type of land? Or is it quite specific?
So you can start with any kind of landscape, you can start with a meadow, or you can start with an orchard that you'll make denser and more diverse. You can start with a forest. There are projects underway that start from a forest with or without clearings. You can often start at the base of a building or with a meadow or lawn. And then indeed it's in all climates. So it's oceanic climate, mountain, plains, Mediterranean climates. And each time It's really an adaptation of the range of plants. It also reflects the objectives, as some project leaders are truly dedicated. For a forest garden, that's going to be, for food, let's say domestic. Others are there for an agricultural forest garden, others for a forest garden on common land, so in towns and villages, in schools and elsewhere. The goal is to restore biodiversity and conduct scientific projects with an environmental focus.
And then you can really have projects of any size. This is one of your other books that you wrote with Aurélie. The Gourmet Forest, Designing Your Garden Forest. This showcases 20 inspiring projects ranging from 10 square meters to 10 hectares in size. While 10 hectares is imaginable, how does one create forest gardens in just 10 square meters?
You can have jungle balconies. We're going to keep this model, having something lush, having something layered. And there are compact fruit trees. There are small vines that bear fruit, which will allow us to have all kinds of produce in small spaces. Then we also have the support of shade vegetables, perennial vegetables. These can really be things that are...
A small garden can create a forest. A big one isn't necessary.
There are many projects on 200 square meters on a square meter. On 2,000, those on several hectares, they're still relatively rare. But it's kind of a tour of France, indeed, of projects we've been able to carry out over several years with the project leaders, a feedback from all that experience.
Well, that's going to be a good resource for us to go and do a lot of inspiring reports on all kinds of gardens and forests, and maybe see some gardens and forests, which will inspire me to make my own later.
At your place? Okay.
Because right now it makes me want to, but I feel like I'm overwhelmed by all the work there is to do with the 1,000 species. Maybe when I see a garden with 50 different species, things where I know more of the names, that will further motivate me to get started and dig deeper into the subject. So thank you for opening us up to this forest garden culture. In any case, thank you so much for welcoming us, and now we're going to sit down to eat.
Enjoy your meal, help yourself.